All right. Hey, I'm Jacob Sundstrom, managing editor of Fear the Fin, here with staff writer Marcus White. Back after a short week off, here to talk about Sharks hockey. We're going to kind of start by wrapping up last week before kind of taking a look ahead for tonight's game against the Islanders, which is at 4 o'clock Pacific. It's on CSN Bay Area, not on NHL Network, I think. I'm 99% sure. I think we're only getting tortured with that once this road trip. So, first week, Marcus, what have you learned about the Sharks?
Well, I think kind of what we expected a little bit. Their top two lines doing most of the offensive work so far. Brent Burns seems to be picking up right where he left off last postseason, as is Logan Couture. I think the most encouraging side in terms of the new additions has to be how well Mikhail Bodker's played alongside Couture and Donskoy. He seems to have fit in really well alongside those guys. Not to say that David Schlemko is not playing great as well. He's looked good on the third pairing. Last night, very sloppy from the Sharks. I think uncharacteristically sloppy. Those fourth and fifth goals were just the results of miscues you really haven't seen in a while from this team. I mean, Justin Braun completely lost Jimmy Vesey at the side of the net on that what it ended up being the game-winning goal. But some encouraging signs so far for sure from the Sharks. Their first three games, they won't go undefeated, so. I guess that's one thing to panic about if you want to have something to panic about. But I think it's been about what we expected so far to start the year.
Yeah, I've really liked how Bodker has played. And I think that honestly speaks more to how good Logan Couture is probably than how good Mikhail Bodker is. I mean, I think we knew coming into it that he's got a lot of speed and a lot of talent in his, but his possession numbers have been just god awful, which, in fairness, is what happens when you play for the Arizona Coyotes, especially the past couple of years. And then with the Avalanche also, it's not like he went from a bad possession team to a better possession team. They're both pretty terrible. So I think my optimistic hope was that, like, okay, playing with Couture, maybe they'll be able to kind of hide his deficiencies while taking advantage of his, his ability. And I think they've been able to do that so far. The bottom six hasn't been quite as shaky as I was worried it would be. I mean, it's not been spectacular by any means, but has been okay. I mean, what's your kind of assessment of how Chris Tierney and Tommy Wingels have played?
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a mixed bag. I think Tierney had a pretty poor play last night. He had a turnover that led to a goal. Tried to get through two guys in his own zone, but I think they've shown signs offensively. They've shown good chemistry together. That third line, I think it's still way too early to have a definitive stance on how well Tierney's played as the third line center. Fourth line, I think they've looked good. They've done what they've wanted to do. They play well below the wall. The Edo's speed really adds an element to that line that they might not have otherwise with Wingels and Carlson, who are two more physical players. But I think they've been, really all you can ask for from a third and fourth line to start the year. The third line scored, I believe, against Columbus. You'd like to, I think, maybe start seeing them chip in a little more offensively because, like I said, so much of the scoring has come from the top two lines. But I think they've been okay to start the year. I think it's probably too early to, maybe call for a Kevin LeBanc or a Barclay Goodrow or a Nikolai Goldobin to come up and take one of those guys' spots. So,
yeah, it seems to me that honestly the biggest problem on the third line has been Patrick Marleau, not Chris Tierney. Marleau looks, just not good. He's just not very good anymore. I mean, he looks slow. His hands are not good. I mean, there were a couple chances last night that, Patrick Marleau 2 years ago scores 100 times out of 100, and he just maybe still too early to be concerned about it, but also wasn't very good last year.
right.
And it's kind of one of those things where the third line hasn't been great, but not because Chris Tierney hasn't played well. It's been Marleau that's played poorly, at least in my opinion.
He's had a bit of a slow start. I think I agree about his hands. He's wobbling some passes and not receiving passes well. I think he was a bit of a slow starter last year too. Maybe that's just becoming the norm with him in his age. I mean, you talk about a chance last night. Nieto set him up with a great pass from the half wall, and he shot it right into Kevin Hayes. Maybe at a younger age, Marleau either scores that or he makes the pass across to, I think it was Joel Ward in front of the net. But it's still 3 games. I think it's still too early to, have panic on Patrick Marleau. That salary is obviously not what they want it to be, and it's probably an overpayment for what he is now. But I I think I've liked what I've seen from him in some instances. In others, I haven't. I think he, Tierney, and Ward have the potential to mesh really well together. I thought they were excellent in the third period against Los Angeles last week. But, it's been flashes so far, not enough consistent play from them.
Yeah, I think it's possible, too, that line just does a whole lot better when it's going up against slower teams. And I don't mean that to be like, most guys do better against slower teams, but I think that particularly it plays to Marlowe's skill set, which is still his hockey sense. I mean, it's not like he's gotten, stupider at 37. That's not true. So, yeah, I mean, I think when he has a little more time and space to work with, he can still do incredible things. But I think it's just the fact that the Rangers are such a, attacking the puck type team, a really aggressive team. It's harder for him to adjust to that, I think, than it would have been previously, which is why I think you see guys like Nieto really excel last night because, he's just very fast and it's a bit easier for him to kind of make that adjustment. That's the way he wants to play anyway. So he can kind of burn guys on their, over exuberance, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the Rangers' tempo last night really surprised me. I think maybe should have expected it with Girardi and Kevin Klein out of the lineup that they were going to play a more up-tempo game, but that forward group is very, very fast. It reminded me of a lot of the problems that Pittsburgh gave San Jose in the Stanley Cup final, which, maybe a little worrisome that they brought in a speed merchant like Mikhail Bodker and they still can't deal well with opposing team speed. I thought Bodker looked really strong last night. He fit perfectly in that kind of up-tempo type of game too. But, I think it's also an early season kind of a shock to the system because you think about the teams they played in the preseason, nobody's going to confuse the Arizona Coyotes with a fast team or the Anaheim Ducks or even the young Vancouver Canucks. So I think that was probably more of a shock than anything. And I don't know if I'd attribute it to a roster flaw as much as, okay, this is really the first fast team we've played all season.
Right, and obviously you can factor in the whole road trip thing too, especially with an older team. It's hard. It's just hard. I'm not comfortable saying, oh, that's obviously what it is. But there's so many little things that can factor into it that I would have to see it. I'll be curious to see how they play against Pittsburgh on Thursday. If they get really bad again, then okay, maybe it's at least time to take a deeper look and go back and be like, okay, so what exactly isn't working? So it wouldn't be a panic time by any means, but at least worth a second look. So tonight against the Islanders, Sharks playing their first back-to-back of this season. In my opinion, at least coming into this road trip, I was thinking Islanders, this is the tougher of the two teams, given how well the Rangers played last night and even how well they played against St. Louis in a game that they lost, which they really, Henrik Lundqvist played like, garbage. So is this the better New York team?
Going into the season, I think the Islanders were the better team than the Rangers, and I think on paper they are. But, right now I think it might be hard to say because, the Rangers, they do have a lot of turnover in their forward group, but that kind of core group remains the same, whereas the Islanders lost two really big pieces in Franz Nielsen and Kyle Okposo this offseason, and they're working in Andrew Ladd, they're working in Jason Chimera. Tavares was at the World Cup for most of training camp. I think this would probably be the easier test, and I think, that's maybe why you see DeBoer giving the start to Aaron Dell tonight as opposed to last night against the Rangers because he too thought maybe because of those adjustments. I would have thought coming into the road trip that the Islanders would be the tougher test, but it's so early in the season that I think any of our notions of what's supposed to happen on paper can pretty much be thrown out the window. I mean, the Oilers are 2-1 for Pete's sake,
Canucks are 2-0, first in the Pacific Division right now. Look out. So Aaron Dell's getting his first start, as you kind of alluded to a moment ago. What is a reasonable expectation for what he needs to do in order, to keep the job?
Man, I think he can't be as bad as Alex Stalock. I think.
Well, God willing.
that is the bare minimum. The encouraging signs are there based on his AHL play. He's been good enough and faced enough shots in the AHL where you can reasonably assume that he'll be a decent NHL goaltender at least. I think they don't need him to be like James Reimer last year, who was so good in the 8 games he played, but I think they just need him to be a league average backup this season. If he can be league average behind Jones, they won't need to look outside of the organization. They can give Jones enough rest because last year Stalock was so bad that they couldn't afford to rest Jones. You had back-to-backs where you had to play Jones, and if you didn't play Jones in a game, I remember last year going into games thinking, oh, Stalock's starting tonight. The Sharks are probably going to lose. And they lost more often than not when he played last year. So I think he just needs to provide steady goaltending, at a league average clip, like a 915 save percentage over the whole season. He's drawn favorable comparisons to Jones. So I don't think the jump from playing in front of him to playing in front of Jones will be as large as it was playing in front of Alex Stalock and playing in front of Jones, because those goalies were so different. But I think that he just needs to come in. He just needs to play. He needs to be an average goalie, basically.
Right. I guess what are some other concerns with the Islanders is that obviously we've got guys like Tavares. It seems kind of like this team, when you actually go back and look at the roster, it's like, there's not really a whole lot of names that really jump out at you. Andrew Ladd, I think, is a guy that's quite good, and that's a guy that, every team wanted their team to be on, I think, unless you're an idiot. So I guess I'm an Oilers fan. Is there, any other guy on this roster that should be particularly concerning for the Sharks?
I think, maybe some of their young players like Matthew Barzal making the team out of camp. The player Boston could have drafted last year at the draft, but did not, with their litany of first-round picks.
You gotta take a third-rounder in the first round. If you give that opportunity, you got to take it.
Of course, you gave up your third-rounder for Zach Rinaldo, so you had to make up for it somehow. I'm looking at Ryan Strome. I think he's a player that they're relying upon to have a big season in the absence of Nielsen and Okposo. I think a big reason why they let him walk is because they're confident in Ryan Strome. But I agree, it's a team. Mikhail Grabovski's out, so they're not as strong up front. There's still a good amount of depth, though. I think they're just a solid, deep team up front. Nikolai Kulemin's pretty good, and Cal Clutterbuck as well, even though he's mostly known for hits. He can still chip in offensively. Honestly, I think their biggest strength, you could argue, is on their blue line. I think they have a surprisingly strong blue line. Nick Leddy, very quietly, I think, is one of the league's best offensive defensemen over the last few years. Johnny Boychuk's on the decline, but they still have Travis Hamonic, Calvin DeHaan, and now Dennis Seidenberg's drawing in. I think the biggest thing you have to worry about if you're the Sharks tonight offensively, though, obviously John Tavares' line. I think that's probably the key tonight to winning the game, is you can shut down his line, then you can shut down the Islanders. We saw it in the postseason last year. Big reason why they advanced past Florida was because Tavares was so good by himself. And, you could argue that the Panthers even outplayed the Islanders in that series.
Yeah, I think they absolutely did. And I think Tavares basically put the team on his back. I mean, watching that, it was not super convincing, not a great sign for me if I'm an Islanders fan. Although I think tonight, I know the Tavares line is big, obviously, but if the jumbo line plays the way it's supposed to, that can be kind of neutralized at least a little bit. The guys that tend to concern me are guys like Ryan Strome, these little speedy forwards or whatever that just skate circles around, the giant monsters that the Sharks put out there night in, night out. And to me, that's a concern. And I can't remember exactly where he's playing. If he's being matched up against the Couture line, then it's less concerning to me. If he's out there against the Tierney line, that's where I would start to be a little more like, oh, okay, this could be actually kind of a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna depend on usage. We've talked about how Pete DeBoer isn't a huge usage guy like his predecessor in Todd McClellan. He kind of just gives everybody even zone starts, but I think Jack Capuano is going to rely on last change tonight to get the matchups that he wants. It says that Strome is actually on the top line with Andrew Ladd and John Tavares, and that Brock Nelson is centering that second line with Matthew Barzal, former first-round pick, centering the third. So we'll see. This is according to Roto World. I'm just looking at their team depth charts. They seem to be pretty accurate. Their Sharks one is dead on, so I'd imagine they're pretty up to speed there. Brock Nelson versus Logan Couture, that's a matchup I like on paper for the Sharks. I think Couture has played really, really well this season. I've seen no drop-off really from how well he played in the postseason. And, it's only 3 games so far, but if he can even come close to sustaining the level of play he did in the postseason, we know how good this team is with him in the lineup compared to with him out of the lineup. But all of a sudden, you have arguably the best 1-2 punch in the National Hockey League down the middle if Couture can play up to that level. So it's nice to see him continuing to play that well for the Sharks. We'll see if it can keep up going forward.
Yeah, I think we're almost getting to a point where if this is who Logan Couture is now, that it might be pretty underrated actually going forward. I mean, if this, I mean, it's possible. It's been long enough now, given how long they played in the postseason, how he played when he came back from injury. I mean, if this is Logan Couture, he's legitimately a top 25 player, no problem. And that's would be great news if they can get back to that place. 2-3 years ago, we could say, the Sharks had the best third line center in hockey because that's where Joe Pavelski was playing. It'd be really nice again to be able to say that they have at least a top 5 second line center. That would be that would bode really well for what they need to do rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think he's by all accounts showing that he's taking that next step, and I think it also just bodes well, not to think too far down the line, but if he could take that step and he's as good as he's been, then that makes losing Joe Thornton eventually a lot easier. And, maybe you can slide Joe to the second line center if his game starts to age. You don't have to force Tomas Hertl to play center necessarily. So he's a former top 10 pick. I think he's been so good for so long. I think he's absolutely underrated. You just worry that it'll get into Jonathan Taves territory where he's been so underrated for so long that he's now overrated. But I don't think that'll happen with Logan.
I would be perfectly happy for ever a Sharks player to manage to be overrated. That I feel like that would be pretty hard to do. It'd be difficult.
Do you think we're there with Pavelski?
Oh, well, if he were Canadian, yes, absolutely, we would be. But the fact that American media doesn't give two shits about American hockey, I think that makes it a lot tougher. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's. I mean, except for maybe his grandma, they're putting him in a top 10 players conversation. I don't think that's happening.
Yeah, so. I agree with that. I mean, you see some ratings and you see where people put, the NHL Network does their top 50 players list. They have Pavelski ahead of Thornton. I don't know.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that, but I think I agree. Him being American and him playing in the West Coast, you're not going to get a Jonathan Taves situation with him where there's not that constant media exposure.
Well, even think about a guy like Anze Kopitar, who is a guy that is like Jonathan Taves and that he's been underrated so long that he should be overrated by now.
Right.
But he's not because he's Slovenian and he's still underrated. He's been underrated for 10 years. And I feel comfortable saying, oh yeah, he's underrated for sure. And it's right, okay.
Yeah. Even with 2 cups. With 2 cups.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. West Coast, not Canadian, couldn't care less.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, really the West Coast thing by itself will do that pretty much. I mean, I wouldn't say Joe Thornton's underrated, although he probably is. In fact, in terms of how good he still is now, I think people are oh yeah, he's one of the best of all time. That part, his legacy isn't underrated, but how important he is to the Sharks right now. I think last season in the playoffs, especially, people kind of got a sense of oh yeah, the Sharks really suck if he's not on the team.
Yes, no, exactly. He's the guy they can least afford to have go down to injury, bar none.
Yeah. Yep. And so luckily for the Sharks, he's never been injured. I mean, he's really.
The last time I think he missed a game was he had that almost concussion scare where he got hit in St. Louis a couple years ago and missed a couple games, but then he came back within 3 games. That's the last time I can remember him missing games.
Right, because he even had that hit last year, right? It's not a concussion, but was absolutely a concussion, where he came back. I don't even know if he missed a game for that. He might not have, which, right.
That's worrisome, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. He's fine. He's a big, strong man. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, for me, if you look ahead, even just 2 years, my assumption is that Thornton signs a 1-year contract and comes back next year, and then it kind of does the auger thing until he's bored with us.
Yeah.
I mean, right. I mean, I assume that's the plan. I would do, Couture, Pavelski, Hertl as my top 3 centers, and then build my lineup around that, and kind of see where you go from there. I mean, the team is also that also depends partially on the development of Chris Tierney, because if he gets better, I think he certainly has could project to be a very good third line center, no problem. So that might change things, but
of course,
I don't know. That would be the way I would do it if I were to ballpark what I think the lineup's going to look like in 2-3 years.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so game is at 4:00. That's in a short 1 hour and 21 minutes on CSN Bay Area if you're in the Bay Area. On 95.7 The Game, I believe is where they're living on the radio.
K-Fox.
Oh, Jesus. Are they back? I thought they just moved from K-Fox. Weren't they on K-Fox last year?
They're still on K-Fox as far as I'm aware.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. Who listens to the radio anyway? You can stream it on the Sharks website. Just go there.
And we just got some breaking news here. Michael Haley will play tonight for the San Jose Sharks.
Really?
Matt
Not
Nieto.
Ryan Carpenter?
Matt Nieto is out of the lineup. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Maybe something to do with Haley playing a former team. He played for both the Rangers and the Islanders in his career. He's getting his first NHL game against, a team he played against. I'm interested to see what happens here with that tonight because DeBoer talked about him as a player that you can play 8 to 12 minutes a night. He played more than 8 minutes, I think, less. He played 19 or 16 games last year. He did it less than 5 times, and he never played more than 12 minutes. He only twice played more than 10 minutes. So I'm interested to see if DeBoer puts his money where his mouth is, so to speak, tonight with Michael Haley. I don't think he will. I would think that's a little dangerous given that it's the second night of a back-to-back and you're playing a good team. And if you're not going to use a guy a lot, you're just putting undue pressure on some of your older legs on the team. And with the game against the reigning Stanley Cup champions coming up on Thursday, I kind of question this decision.
The only way that Michael Haley gets more than 12 minutes is if the Sharks are either up by 8 goals or down by 8 goals. Pretty much would be the way that'll go.
I agree.
Scratching Nieto is just so stupid. This coaching staff. I feel like Matt Nieto actually is probably the most underrated player on the Sharks.
I think that
it's a competition between those two.
There's a fair case to be made. I think Nieto, he doesn't score a ton, but he drives possession well for his team, and he's creates chances to score. I thought last night he was one of the Sharks' more dangerous players. I thought he's played really well so far this season. This just kind of reeks to me of not being in New York, obviously on the road trip, but this smells like we need to make a change. But I'm disappointed not to see a Ryan Carpenter in before a Michael Haley. Give a young kid a chance and see if he's improved based on last season. I think Casey Cizikas might be playing for the Islanders tonight, and I know he's known to drop the gloves, so maybe that physicality component is why. But
then why is Tommy Wingels playing? He's not playing because he's good, because spoiler alert, he's bad. So at least let him go hit somebody if that's what he's going to do.
I agree.
That's the
guy.
Although
I do think Wingels has played well this season so far in 3 games.
Still though, he's a guy that can do both, right? He can play okay as a fourth liner, and then he can also, whatever. He has an attitude problem anyway.
Yeah.
That's just silly, and it is disappointing not to see Ryan Carpenter drawn to the lineup. I know we've talked about it, a guy, but organizational guy that's given a lot to the team. Whatever, he's the guy who deserves to play. And again, just it's why are we even taking him on the road trip? Just let him play with the Barracuda.
No, exactly, and that's a big question. I think maybe they figured that Gaudreau, Goldobin, and LeBanc would be better served by the minutes, but why even take him at all if you're not going to play him? You already have one extra forward. Do you really need two? It's a little bit of a confusing decision tonight. If the Sharks could win tonight, DeBoer loves to cite their record with Haley in the lineup. Even though they were 500 last year, they won exactly as many games that he played in and lost. They were 8-8 in games in which he played. So
and they were better than 500, when he wasn't in the lineup.
Exactly. No, I agree. So we'll see what happens tonight. I
also don't think Peter DeBoer actually believes that. I think that's just bullshit.
No,
I think hockey coaches are full of shit. There's almost nothing they say that is worth literally anything, which is fine. I don't care, but that is what it is.
Pashelka just tweeted that DeBoer said, quote, "We've got some extra guys and we want to put some fresh legs in there." So Michael Haley playing
it. Fresh stone? Can stones be fresh? I don't think it works like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's a case of a guy playing against his old NHL team, wanting to give him his first game of the year. But I would have rather seen Ryan Carpenter.
We're getting all sentimental all of a sudden. Incredible. Wow.
Mike Condon, former Hab, is starting in Montreal tonight on the second night of a back-to-back. So that, I guess maybe that plays into more than we think. Yeah.
Good Lord. Okay, whatever. So if you choose to watch this game, at your own risk, especially because you have to deal with the stupid Barclays Center camera angle, which is just god awful. That's going to be at 4:00. Allegedly, it's on the radio somewhere. Check your local listings. It's on CSNB area. That part I know.
I think it's actually on California, CSN California.
What? Who are they getting bumped by? Preseason basketball?
They're always on California.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, whatever. I haven't lived up there for 1,000 years.
No, you're fine.
CSN didn't even exist when I lived up there.
Oh, yeah,
right?
exactly.
I'm all about Fox Sports Pacific or whatever it was we were doing back then.
Oh, yeah, Fox Sports Net, Bay Area, TV.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Back
right.
in the day.
Yeah. I'm old. All right, let's call it. We're going to do this again next week, maybe the same day, either Monday or Tuesday, one of those days for sure. Anyway, I'm not going to plan it right now, but one of those. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes if you're tired of looking at our faces. Just search Fear the Fin on iTunes and subscribe. All right. You can follow me on Twitter at Fear the Fin and at Jake Sundstrom. You can follow Marcus at Marcus P. White, like the color. And we'll be back soon. Thanks, guys.